GIMP is well known as the originator of GTK, formerly known as the GIMP toolkit, now just going by GTK. It doesn't actually stand for anything, but it's more like the GNOME toolkit at this point. However, did you know that when GIMP first came along, it did not use GTK, because GTK didn't actually exist yet. Up until the 0.6 release, it was actually using an entirely different toolkit. That toolkit is known as Motif. More on that in just a bit, because now we can actually go back and experience that old style of GIMP, or as they called it in the documentation back then, the GIMP. Every reference to GIMP in the documentation was the GIMP. I don't know why, I don't know when they dropped it, but that's what they did. Here we have a GitLab repo, flatpak for GIMP 0.54.1 from 1996. And honestly, this is the perfect use for a flatpak. Yes, you might come up with some other containerized solution for it, but not having ancient, garbage old dependencies littering my system that maybe you can get working. Maybe. Possibly, but it's probably going to break some random other thing in your system, so putting that in a container, making that easily shippable, honestly, better way to do it. This might seem like a really random number to go and release. Why 0.54? Why not 0.01? Or why not any other version? Well, 0.54 was the first publicly available version of GIMP. When you think of the GIMP initial release, this is the version. Not only that, there are some fun things about this version. You might know that GIMP stands for the GNU Image Manipulation Program. Not at this time, though. It actually didn't stand for that, because that didn't happen until 1997, when Stallman reached out to the original developers and said, hey, this would be nice as part of the GNU suite. Originally, it was the General Image Manipulation Program. This is also the version that Larry Ewing made Tux in, and when you see what this software is capable of, you're gonna ask, why the hell and how the hell did you manage that? Because this version of GIMP is not exactly the most featureful version. That's what we will say. In case you don't know, Tux came from a Linux logo design contest because Torvalds was bit by a penguin in Canberra, and that made him start liking penguins and was like, oh, let's have a penguin as the logo. He says that in Canberra he contracted penguinitis. This was back in 1993. That is actual lore. That is not a joke. And I'm going to save the rest of the Tux lore for a dedicated video on it, so keep your eyes out for that one. Anyway, enough rambling. Let us take a look at the software. Welcome to GIMP. Now, you might be thinking, there's a little bit missing here. You'd be right. So, back at this point, GIMP was still using the multi-window layout. As such, when I launched the application, it actually, because I'm running this on Wayland, it's running through X-Wayland, and it would have been using X11 systems to place itself, it is being placed in the top left corner of my leftmost monitor, which makes it very annoying to work with. But it wasn't until, I want to say, somewhere late GTK2 that the single window design that most of you probably make use of today is the core way that GIMP was being used. So, if we go into File, let's go to New. There are some keybinds here, Control-N, and various other things we can use as well. So let's go to New, and by default, it is 256 by 256. It is set to RGB. Clicking that button makes it appear as if it is going to change, even though it doesn't. Old design. You can set it to grayscale if you want, but let's go OK. And that, once again, spawned on the other monitor. So here is our canvas. First problem. What are any of these tools? Well, none of them have tooltips. So there's 2 ways you can work it out. 1, you can wing it. 2, actually, I guess there's 3 ways. 2, you can read the documentation. Or 3, we can go to the tools menu and then press them in here until we know what the icons actually represent. It's not a good solution, but it's the solution we have. It's a functional one, if not great. So let's go and use the paintbrush tool. And how do I set a color? Well, we go to color and then palette, and then it puts the palette over here. Let's set it to red. There is also a background color as well, except you do have to switch between them, which is a little bit awkward. So let's be set to red, and then look at that. Wow, we're set to red. We do have Control Z to undo stuff, so we can do that. That's cool. Let's just draw a circle. Yeah, anyway. You might notice one thing missing here. Where's the eraser? There's no eraser. There's no eraser in this list here. None at all. Now, if you look online, you will certainly see people claiming there was an eraser in this version. If there is an eraser in this version, it's not a tool. And I don't know where it would be because I've not been able to find it. One thing I'm certain that is missing, though, is layers. GIMP didn't have layers at this point. Onions might have layers, but GIMP 0.54 doesn't. So the way that you would do stuff, the way that you would effectively emulate layers is basically you would have multiple canvases open and treat them like that. Is this a good solution? God, no. And there's a reason why we have layers at this point, but part of this multi-window design did make it really easy to work with multiple canvases like this. So it was something you could very well do, but I'm very happy they changed it. That happened with the big rework in 0.99 before the 1.0 release. Some tools are working mostly how you'd expect. You know, like rectangular select, it's a rectangular select, it works fine. Other things like text input, though, they're real weird. Now, in modern GIMP, you'd click and then like a window would pop up and you had to type right here. No. That one did open on the right screen, which is nice. But you select your font in here, and then you write your text in this input field down here, and then that goes and adds it. Also, there's no color select in here. So if you want to make sure the color is right, you've got to go open the color palette, set the color to what you want. So let's say you want it to be green, and then we can go and add text, and now we can do that, and now it's the right color. Then we can unselect it, and there we go. Now we have text. Holy shit, there's a lot of additional steps there. Basically, every time you're running GIMP at this time, you would want additional windows, like the color palette to always be open, and, you know, maybe you want some other things in here to be open as well, depending on what your use case is going to be, but this one especially always had to be there. Now, everything here is attached to the main window, so if we close that, then everything else is going to close, but now I've got to reopen that and make a new canvas, and yeah. It also doesn't prompt you to save it if you close the window, which is also a bit of a problem. At this point, there are also some filters available. Weird things like blur. We had bleed, gamma, invert. So if we go and add something to the screen like this, and then we go filters, effects, and invert. Wow, it didn't invert. So a lot of that, like, basic foundational stuff is there. There was also a basic plugin system at the time. Now, to be fair, GIMP is still working on a new plugin system now, so right now there's still a relatively basic plugin system, but there were plugins available. With that in mind, however, getting them was another story. This is the GIMP plugin registry. This is an archive from a couple of years later, so this is around the 0.99 release, but there are 0.54 extensions on here. You just gotta actually search for them a little bit more than you otherwise would. Since the recording of this, the dev did slightly modify the GitLab. Now there is a GitLab page, which honestly does look really good and totally fits the vibe, but more importantly, we now have all of the plugins listed here, and there's also a section for custom plugins, so if you want to go and make some plugins for it, you can also do that. If you want to install them though, all it takes is taking the file, putting them in the plugins directory at this place right here, and then you'll be good to go. If you want to go and like compile your own plugins and build your own plugins, you can also do that as well. If you really want to, because there are docs. So the docs are linked in the GitLab, and the GitLab kind of exists as this place to bring a lot of this old information together. So here are the docs. Now, I don't think the screenshots work unless the dev changed it. Nope, the screenshots are not there. Dev should fix that one. Anyway, let's go to the documentation, and it is basically just a giant HTML page listing out all of the functionality. Let's say we go to the extending the GIMP, because as I said, the is always attached to it. How to use plugins, standard plugins, all this stuff. Programming for plugins. Okay, that takes us back to the main page. Is some of this stuff even... Okay, some of this stuff is not even complete, so maybe making them is not going to be great. There's a lot of this stuff which has not been properly archived, which is not really out there anymore. So it's more of a... This is really like a historical project trying to preserve this software. But with the documentation you do have, it's documentation for the first publicly available release of 30-year-old software. So you get what you get. And some of the documentation is not exactly the most useful at explaining how to use things. It's more like, oh, here's this feature that exists. How do I use it? Here's this feature that exists. If you do want to try it out for yourself, and I really would recommend it because it is interesting to go see what this old software was actually capable of, especially knowing the fact that this is something that was used to make Tux. This software, which is a nightmare to work in, was used to make Tux. I don't know what comparable software at the time was capable of doing, but I would assume the Adobe suite was probably better by this time, like considerably better. It would have had layers back then at the very least. So, I think that's kind of neat. Anyway, if you want to try this out for yourself, there is a flatpak linked here. It's not on FlatHub. You have to go and download the flatpak and then just manually install the file, and then you can just run it. Also, there are some tutorials which do exist out there for this older stuff. So if you want to learn how to use older versions of the GIMP, you can do so. One thing that you should do is also install the Xorg fonts. Now, why do I need to install fonts if it's a flatpak? Well, this is a flatpak of an application from 30 years ago, and it doesn't use the modern font systems we make use of. It makes use of Xorg fonts, which were a completely different system, which no one does anymore. GIMP 0.54 predates font config/xft and asks the X server directly. The editor still launches without them, but the text tool quits the process on OK unless the host has the legacy font in its font path, and then, yeah. These are packaged on Arch and also on Fedora. I'm not aware if they're packaged on other distros, but check them out, and they might be. They very possibly won't be because there's not really a reason to package them now, but check them out for your distro. Also, whilst this is GIMP 0.54, there have been some patches made to it to have it actually be able to function. They're mostly like back-end things just to not have it immediately crash and have it work and behave correctly. But there are some additional changes that have been made. So it's technically not exactly 0.54, but it's as close as you're going to get running on a modern system. For the GIMP here, you're seeing a toolkit which is very grey, which is the kind of design language which was very common at the time. But this, as I said earlier, is being done with a toolkit known as Motif. So let's talk briefly about what that is. This is a toolkit stemming from 1988 by the Open Software Foundation, which after merging with XOpen became the Open Group. It was created as a request for technology where they wanted to solicit existing tech companies for something to either adopt directly or combine a bunch of different tech together to, build some sort of framework here, and pretty much all of the big names of the time got involved in some way. Ultimately, they decided on a combination of the look and feel, window manager, and common user access compliance from HP and Microsoft's CXI, along with the widget toolkit API and user interface language from DEC's XUI. When we think of Motif, there are two main projects that come to mind, firstly being MWM, the Motif Window Manager. This is something which a lot of people of that era probably made use of. This was a very, very common option. Yes, it looks old and dated. That gray, super flat. It was minimal design before minimal design. It wasn't minimal design on purpose necessarily. It was minimal design because of hardware limitations. It screams that era. I'm not a fan of it, but I know some people really do still like it. This was made by the Open Software Foundation and was proprietary. Yeah, that was a weird thing that happened back then. A lot of companies, a lot of foundations that called themselves open would make a lot of things which were proprietary, because Motif as well was also proprietary. There was a separate open Motif under questionably open terms released in the year 2000, but that was under a license which only allowed royalty-free distribution. So it was a weird thing. There was this big re-release in 2012 under the LGPL 2.1 or later, but before that point, it was either proprietary or questionably open source. The other thing, even more common, this is CDE, the Common Desktop Environment. This is something which, if you were using Unix at the time, you 100% saw, but also, if you were using KDE a little bit later, this probably looks a little familiar. And the reason for that is KDE was very inspired by CDE. KDE was trying to be this open source Linux version of CDE, at least very early on. It obviously changed from that point and looks nothing like that at this point, but that was their initial creation. Qt was under a proprietary license at the time, so obviously that caused some problems, but that then led to the creation of GNOME, which ended up pretty much replacing CDE's usage. Both KDE and GNOME very much replaced the usage of CDE, which was the standard on commercial Unix. Over time, obviously, KDE kind of got dropped from the commercial distros, and GNOME took that place. Now KDE has been rising back up, and GNOME is it's still being used in those commercial distros, but amongst users has been very much falling out of favor over a number of things they've been doing over the past 10 plus years. Right now, it's still the main thing, but we'll see where that goes going forward, especially if they keep going down the path that they've been going down. One reason why GNOME popped off so much early on is GNOME was the GNU desktop, right? It was the GNU network object model environment. It's the thing that Stallman used. It's the thing that all of the big open source people used, all the free software people used, because back then, the free software movement had a lot more of a stranglehold on this Linux space because, GNU, Linux, open source, all this stuff. Nowadays, you have a lot more people who are being kind of pragmatic about it, but back then, that movement was incredibly strong, so being tied to it, I think that's a big part of why it really popped off, and it's a big part of why, being part of the GNU suite for GIMP was also a big deal as well. Many years later, in 2012, as I said, Motif did go open source, and CDE also followed along as well, again, under that LGPL 2.1 license, but at this point, they are both basically dead-ish kind of projects. Motif Window Manager, that had a last release in 2017. CDE did have a release in 2025, but it was a very minor release, if I recall. But there are people who are still trying to work on these projects. I don't think they're ever coming back, but, you know, neither is GIMP 0.54 because you can certainly use it, but it's not something I would really want to go back to. So let me know. Have you tried out this version? Maybe you tried it out back in the day. Maybe you've tried it out now, and it works totally fine in X Wayland. So if you want to run it on X11, you want to run it on Wayland, you can do that. Obviously, it's going to not be native Wayland, but besides it spawning on a random screen, it works fine, but it works like GIMP 0.54. Anyway, if you liked the video, go like the video, go subscribe as well, and if you really liked the video and you want to become one of... I didn't switch to this one. One of these amazing people over here, check out the Patreon, Scribe, Stelly, Barapay, linked in the description down below. That's gonna be it for me, and are you the GIMP?
Something like this.